Hi everyone, again. So, just to give you a bit of perspective, what is the Members Enquiries system all about? What does it do? Well, it supports our democratically elected members to submit their inquiries. We have over 75 councillors in Wigan. It also supports our local MPs to submit inquiries as well. What we had on our previous system was a disconnect between councillors and MPs. What we managed to do is bring them all together using the same system. It has been a challenge. We have historically members has been. I suppose this is where the black hole comes into it. Might as well get straight on with it. Really, is that what the black hole is. Look past these. It's the tendency for councillors and members to bypass the system. So I don't know if this is a familiar experience for yourself in local government. Yeah, I'm sure it is. It does cause problems. I'm not going to criticise councillors for doing that. I think those days are gone, because I think there is a reason that they do that, and I want to explore those in terms of how we've used that information to build the process. But in a nutshell, what happens is that we have a system in place. There's a perception that actually going through alternative routes like email, telephone, speaking directly to officers, that's actually going to get the job done quicker. As a consequence, Joe's team doesn't know about those inquiries, they don't get logged on the system, we don't have an audit, it doesn't get fed into any performance framework, and they just get swallowed into this black hole and disappear forever. So they get stored on some labyrinth network and Outlook on somebody's private drive, and we just don't know what's going on. Of late though, over the last 2 years, got better at intercepting those inquiries. So services are now on our side. If an inquiry comes in an alternative route, it gets sent to the Members Enquiries team. They then submit that through the system. Massively inefficient, of course, because it's manual entry. Why do you not do it in the system in the first place? But that's one of the problems. So prior to us introducing our new solution using Jadu or code, these are the figures that we had. 65% of our councillors weren't actually using the system. They were basically going through email, going through services. So it sort of made a mockery of having a system at all. What a system should be about is creating a fair and actual process that everyone can use, but that clearly wasn't happening. So the very pertinent question is to ask, so why is this happening? We thought that was actually a really important question to answer before we actually went ahead with the Jadu build. So the first thing, obviously, an obvious thing is actually what was the old system like? So as has been mentioned today and throughout the days, that we used to have a solution built around the Report It app. Now, I'm not going to criticise Report It. It did work to a degree for our residents. It was like one of those on-the-go solutions that you would have in your hand. I can see a pothole, I can see this in the street, take a picture, tap, put report in, it's into the system. But for councillors, I think it was, some liked it, a lot didn't. And the reason why is that I think it's just due to the nature of the type of work that councillors do, is that the inquiries that they were submitting very often were quite complex. It wasn't something that you could just submit through an app. The Report It app came with, by default, a 500 character limit, not a word, character limit. So if you've got an adult social care sort of inquiry, for example, trying to get that in 500 characters, well, it would always be impossible. So again, that was encouraging councillors to bypass the system, because they just didn't have the functionality available through the Report It app to do the things that they wanted to do. They could only attach photographs, they couldn't attach emails and documents, which obviously sometimes support a lot of council inquiries. So really, I think, forgive me for these terms, but it was almost like a thoughtful failure with councillors, the Report It app. It wasn't for residents it worked, but for councillors, the assumption was that this will be great for councillors on the go in the constituencies doing their reports, but that's not the reality of the way the councillors work. This feeds into this next point really about councillors having they're a high power and high interest stakeholder. When I wake up in the morning, I don't think of potholes. When councillors wake up in the morning, they do think of potholes. It's part of the raison d'etre, it's almost the reason to be. There are eyes and ears in the community doing some amazing work and bringing those issues to our services. So in that respect, is that it's when we were building that process, is that we really needed to sort of understand what that user profile is, which I sort of intimated in the idea that actually the submit inquiry is different to residents. Very passionate about supporting the constituents, and they demand those best outcomes within a agreed timescale. So again, if they don't think they're getting a raw deal through the system, they may look at an alternative way of doing that. We all do that. when we've, we've received bad services ourselves, we will do it ourselves. We will, where's that telephone? I need to speak. So it's sort of understandable in a way why it's happening. And the other important thing as well about thinking about the user profile is that counsellors, the average age of counsellors, I'm guessing off my head, it's around 50, I would say. So by default, that makes digital literacy skills lower in that group. So really, those counsellors need consistent support. So I think when we introduced the report, we did give that consistent route. We're trying our very best to do that. But it's, you can't divide yourself into 10 people sometimes. It's difficult to give that consistent support. So again, if you don't like this app, I normally send emails, I'm going to send it through emails. So this is giving a sort of picture why that bypassing is taking place. If you look at the figures, the statistics, this is quite interesting as well. This sort of tells the story. So you can see here, reported at launch back in 2017, nicely plodding a long way up. COVID comes around. What we would like, obviously, is inquiries to decrease. They doubled during COVID. So it was actually, again, telling us, and as mentioned before, 65% of those are actually bypasses. So it's almost like maybe that spike actually. It's almost like reporting crime, and you don't know what you can't see. The fact that services are picking those and then sending those to the teams, that it's indicating that that's the reason the counsellors are doing it. And again, that additional pressure on service might affect timescales. So then another reason for a counsellor to bypass the system. So these really were just a summary. What we did, I think one of the most important things that we did when we were building the process, there's a human element about designing the system. We wanted to have that engagement straight away with our counsellors. So there's obviously, we had a scrutiny committee, we also had a group of counsellors also helping us to develop that process. From the word go, they were very much involved in that mix, and they came up with 15 key recommendations, which were our guiding principles around the build. But it was that counsellor engagement through that sort of user testing, that regular feedback loop with the counsellors when we were building things, and also the introduction of a digital buddy system. So this was quite a revolutionary thing. So this wasn't just my team, it was people from across the council who were paired up with a counsellor to give them that support that they need to use this new system. So we did try that with reports, and we did give that support, but it was only a couple of people. This time it was almost like that digital champions model, where staff were taking those key responsibilities for supporting their counsellors, and it helped to make that transition then to use this new system. Again, from the key recommendations, it was that improved functionality when sort of submitting inquiries as well, is that gone was the days of the family character limit. We introduced a method of being able to attach photographs, documents, and emails. And that improved communication is that inquiries, one of the big issues I think we had with reporting for counsellors is that you would submit an inquiry, and then your next contact would be on day 9. That's one day before the SLA target expires, and saying, well, we've picked your inquiry up, we're going to deal with it. What we're encouraging this is that we're asking services on day 1 to at least tell the counsellor they've picked up and seen that inquiry. So it gives that counsellor the confidence that they know that inquiry is being dealt with, and that mitigates that thing, right, I'm going to bypass, I'm going to send lots of emails because I've heard nothing back. So that was a really key thing. That improved communication. It felt that wasn't quite, well, not felt it, actually, those inquiries were being dealt with, and there was a tangible tracking of that through the emails that we were receiving. This one about preventing inquiries being closed prior to a resolution being completed. This is one, I think, probably the most important requirement, and it's still a bit of a challenge for us, this one, to be honest. What happened on the old reporting for counsellor system? Sometimes services would get an inquiry, they would schedule a resolution, so say, right, okay, this is fitting in my 28-day working calendar, that repair is going to be completed in 20 days' time. Then that inquiry was closed, then that repair didn't take place, and then that inquiry was reopened again. So but at that time, the counsellor had already told the resident that the repair has been planned, it's going to take place on that date. Then the resident's getting back in contact with the counsellor saying it's never taken place, that repair. So what law codes and the process design is able to do is define 2 types of resolutions. And you'll see one of them today, this is a resolution scheduled. If a job's been done, on Jadu, you can move it into a status called resolution complete. If the job's done, all the council has to do then is look at the resolution and decide whether they're happy with that. If it's a resolution in the future, it moves to a resolution scheduled status. And what that does, it asks the service to confirm that that work's been done the day after that scheduled resolution date is expired. So we're finding that's a lot better, and it's preventing, obviously, it means councillors have got a degree of confidence around saying that inquiry is going to get done on that day, because then they'll get an email confirming that it's actually happened as well. So a really important development that in the new system. This final point, and I think this is about the notion that members' inquiries are constantly, you've got to keep moving with it all the time. It's not something you can set up and leave it alone. We need to constantly work with something. We just had a new election, for example, we've got 50 new councillors come in, so we'll be jumping on those new councillors, getting them to use this new system straight away and explaining the benefits of using that new system. But it's about having that message about bypassing. It's very, very controversial, this. Some of our members say, who are you to tell me how I need to be submitting my own inquiries? And that's how it comes sometimes. But what we're trying to do is give them a system saying, well, actually, we use this, you're going to understand where your inquiries are up to. You're not going to be rummaging around in your Outlook inbox looking at that pothole that you've reported 5 months ago. But the services are sending that clear message. When it gets bypassed, there's a standard text that goes out. And I think that's where it's our corporate approach that we need to get better at, but we are getting better at that. But it's always a constant battle. So this is a video of the process. I'll talk through this. So this is the council logging in. This is the interface that they have. Very, very simple. We can either submit an inquiry or look at the dashboard. So this is the form. What we did is that we created a suite of guidance videos that were accessible through the front end of the form that shows councillors exactly what they need to do. That's a really important development. We've enabled councillors still to report inquiries of emergency. If they do select emergency, they get branched to a page that gives them all the information they need. An emergency is a threat to life, property and environment. It's not a crisp packet blowing around on the civic square. That's what we were making sure that the emergency inquiries would define clearly for councillors. Form relatively simple, just having a title, some key information. They can attach their photographs, as you can see on the screen here. And then the councillor gets some guidance about adding constituents details. Some services want constituents details because there's certain things that they need to talk to constituents about. There's a privacy declaration there on there as well, ensuring that we've the right to share that information. This functionality is about copying in other councillors. One of the big issues with members' inquiries is that you've got lots of duplicates. 3 ward members all submitting the same issue. When an issue is submitted and you're copying other members, they receive that correspondence as well, so you're less likely to do a duplicate. This is the dashboard. So if you click on the reference number, this is the chronological timeline that we've talked about today around that inquiry. And they also receive a notification email once that inquiry is submitted. The Members Enquiries team can request further information from a councillor, saying they've not submitted enough information to pass it on to a service. So in this instance, they're asking what's the asset number of the street light that's been blocked by the tree. And the councillor gets an email, they click on a link in that email, and in moments they can provide that information back. So the Members Enquiries team receive that notification, which puts them in a position to be able to assign that inquiry to a service, and it appears on the timeline. So this is the assigning to service. This is the Members Enquiries team. They can split the inquiry if they want to, if there's multiple issues, send it to multiple services. This is assigning to me, I'm the role of the service in this instance. So I'm being assigned to it through this actions button here. And then the Members Enquiries team clicking this assign to service transition, where they select the directorate, the service, and the inquiry type. Now, this information feeds into our data model around Members Enquiries, so we can actually produce performance statistics. And the process of filling this in this form here, adding the information about the asset number of the street light that came back from the member, that moves the inquiry. It sends an email to the service. They receive that inquiry, and within that email, they've got the inquiry details, information about other things they might want to do around the inquiry, so it needs to be reassigned, for example, to another service. But there's a link there where they can click into CXM, and this is the thing I was talking about, where giving councillors the confidence that they've received that inquiry, they transition it to an in progress status, which tells the councillor that your inquiry is being looked at, and again mitigating that problem of potentially councillor bypassing the system and they don't hear anything for a few days. So, again, this is the timeline action. This was a big surprise to us, and I think you're going to talk a bit more about this. Councillors really embraced the timeline and started having a conversation with people who were assigned to those cases. So, councillors and service can have that communication through the timeline in a safe way. A service can put an inquiry on hold if necessary and give reasons why that's on hold. That sometimes happens, an inspector's off sick, for example. We look for legitimate reasons, obviously, for putting things on hold, and there's guidance on the website for services around that, but the council will receive correspondence about that as well. There's a final straight now, providing a resolution. So this is the scheduled resolution that's being provided here. So again, the difference here is that this is a resolution taking place in the future. It's not something that's actually being done now. So the service gives a anticipated date that is going to be completed and details of the resolution in that box. So it's provide that resolution. The councillor receives this email that's got the resolution details in the original inquiry. When the resolution is being completed, the service are asked to confirm that. They'll receive a trigger email the day after the resolution is scheduled, and then they complete that inquiry, and the councillor receives a notification saying that inquiry is now been completed. And within that, there's a couple of links. If the councillor's unsatisfied, they can click unsatisfactory response. Or they can do what you're going to see on the screen now, is confirm that they're happy with that resolution and close that inquiry. So, dead simple, this form. Little checkbox, I'm happy with that. Click next, and that talks back to Jadu and closes that inquiry. If the councillor ignores that email, the inquiry by default, we've got a rule in the system that closes that inquiry after 28 days, which is like a cooling off period in a way. So I know that was quite quick, but that, and obviously I'm delighted to take any questions about to explain a bit more about this, but that is the sort of members' inquiries processing, the very, very, very whistle-stop tour of it. I did mention earlier that we do have functionality within the process around MP inquiries as well. So we do have historically a different way of dealing with MP inquiries. So what we've managed to do is that when that form is submitted, it can differentiate between whether it's a councillor or an MP submitting it. And there's a slightly different journey when it gets to providing that resolution. It goes into this AD sign-off status, and that's MPs love a letter. We're trying to provide digital letters rather than the actual one that goes through the post, but we're still providing MPs with those letters. We do have a bit of functionality where an MP can say they just want a standard resolution like a councillor as well. I think we've only got one MP at the moment who's using that, so it's, I think that's something probably we're going to review at some stage. But it shows, it's been good to get MPs and councillors into one system in a way, so that we've got that, we're not like cross-referencing data sets anymore. So Joe, I'll bring you in talking about what it's meant for your team and your observations about what how councillors using the services.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Paul. So I think it's probably worth just giving you a little bit of background about my involvement with Members Enquiries in general. Started with the local authority in 2004, and one of the first pieces of work that I was involved in was quite basic admin linked to Members Enquiries. A lot of printed pieces of paper off, walking around, putting them on people's desks, walking back round, picking them up, typing up the handwritten notes. To look at where we are now is just amazing. It's just so different. I've seen a variety of different systems. I've seen a variety of different teams, and I just can't thank the digital team enough for just working so closely with us and supporting us to get us here. So, list of successes. First of all, we've had in 2022-23, 96% of members have submitted an inquiry onto the new system. That is just amazing, and a lot of that comes down to that buddy system that we had, where we were working one-on-one with members and just asking them to be supported by a member of our team or a member of a council-wide colleague that would just work with them. Some submit a lot more than others, and we've seen that previously on other systems. Others, they'll do the odd few, and that's absolutely fine, but we're there, they know that we can contact them, they can contact us, and we will support them fully. The team that manage the enquiries themselves are all from a background within the contact centre, which is one of my other services, and they handle contact from around 20 services. So the people that we've got dealing with the Members Enquiries have got a broad range of knowledge. They've got a vast range of skill sets. They know about all of the 90 services that we have on the Members Enquiry system, and they're able to touch base with the right people to just double check that they're triaging that inquiry and assigning it to the right service. Last thing we want is inquiries bouncing round from service to service. That just frustrates the member. They stop using the system. It's as simple as no matter which system you're using. So the system itself, like I've said, it's brilliant. It's a step ahead of anything that I've ever used before, and we've been able to get that buy-in from members by involving them in the process. Like Paul says, task and finish groups. What is it that you need? What is it that we're looking to do to support those members and those services? And we need to do that in conjunction with everybody. It's not a system that just works for members. It's got to work for services as well. So especially what Sam was saying earlier in relation to highways, they get a massive amount of members' enquiries. So what will we look to do in the future now that the highway service are in a position where they've got that automation? Is that a future piece of work for us to look at how we can then integrate the members' enquiries side of things into that process that has got some of that automation whilst still keeping that personal approach for the members themselves? So, use of the timeline, you've just seen a very quick video. Obviously you'll get a chance to sort of see that in more detail from the slides point of view. Fantastic examples of members and officers engaging with each other. Previously what the members would do is they'd email into the Members Enquiries team with a feedback or response, or the service would email into the Members Enquiries team, and there was a lot of to-ing and fro-ing and can you ask the councillor this and can you ask the service that? They can talk to each other now. We're just there for a monitoring and awareness and just making sure things are going down the right track. They've got that direct contact without it sitting in somebody's mailbox, potentially being missed and not being reportable. So that's really good for us. Like I say, use of the timeline creates those better audit trails. We can see an inquiry from start to finish. If somebody comes and asks, so a senior member of staff comes to us and asks us a question about something, we can easily search, easily trace, easily find that inquiry and look at what's going on, where it's at, and make those connections into the services if there's anything else that we need to do. So it's just, the whole process is just so visible and so transparent. So, significantly improving working practices, the team, the capacity that it's created within the team allows them to focus more on quality assurance and actually doing those checks and making sure that services, if there are any changes within services or they've got any queries or they've got any feedback or suggestions on what could be done a little bit different, they're not busy with their heads down working through enquiries and trying to keep track of what's going on, because the system is essentially, once they've done that initial triage, the system is doing that element of it itself. It's got automation built in, we've got automated reminders, there's a lot of it that we've set up that does that bit itself, so our team can focus on making sure it's with the right team, and then the system itself and the processes make sure that that journey flows as smoothly as possible, and then the team are there to just look at what's going on in the background. So the Members Enquiries team improvements, Paul mentioned bypassing from 2021 prior to the launch was 65%. In March 2023 it was 17%. So just something to know, it was all out elections this year, so if you take that out of the equation, it was probably more around 10% bypassing at that point, but obviously it's quite a political time of year and there were lots of asks going on, so that's why that figure is just slightly higher than what it would have been. The average bypassing rate based on that since Jadu launched was 13%, so significantly lower than what we were dealing with previously. which reflects how easy the system is to use and the fact that members are more engaged. So 100% of enquiries submitted in working hours are assigned to the service within 2 hours. So Lindsay manages a team of members of staff. There's 5 of them, 4 FTE, that deal with other elements of customer contact as well, corporate complaints, the MP side of things, ombudsman contact. But that's allowed the capacity to be able to do these different things and understand what's going on across the service. Constantly got somebody looking to see if there's anything new being submitted, and where we say it's generally assigned within 2 hours, that may be an occasion where we've had to go off and ask a service a question. We've got this, we think it's for you, we don't want to put it through the timeline and start some of that questioning until we know that it's sat in the right place. Could be that we need to go back and have a look at some historic enquiries and just see if there's any duplication going on. But essentially, there's somebody there to triage it and get it out to that service as quickly as possible. We've got the new automated reminder email created to alert the team if an inquiry is overdue, so as well as some of the background reporting, which I know Paul's going to touch on some of that. Just having that automation in there takes that pressure off the team and puts that in the hands of the service for them to monitor the dashboards that they've got and to also have a look at any reminders that come through. We've tweaked some of those automatic reminders because at first we were so excited to have automatic reminders. I think we were reminded about everything. You got a notification about everything. There was emails reminding you about this, alerting you to that, double check this, just because we had that functionality. And we did that piece of work in the first instance, so as we were going through the test process, we were looking at that and we were thinking, right, okay, we know we can do that, but do we need that? And we do that in conjunction with the services, but also in conjunction with members, because what we didn't want to do is go live and then have mailboxes flooded with alerts to say something's happened on your system and them just not bother looking because there were too many emails, and then they just end up emailing the service to say, can I have an update on this? So it's like Amanda and Tracy were saying, don't be afraid to try something, don't be afraid to put something in place and then change it, but just making sure that there's that collaboration with the people who are involved in the process. We've got a new user profile created so that the Members Enquiries can chase any overdue inquiries via the timeline. So from a member point of view, their trust in our team has greatly increased, and the relationship with our team has greatly increased because they can see that we're trying to work for them and with them, but also with services as well. If we can see something that is just out of time, or if there's something that we're aware of as an issue, they can see that the team, as well as trying to process new ones coming in and review ones that are already there, they're actively working and reporting and quality checking, and they can see that we're prompting the service, sort of, come on, we're ready for an update now. We know that you've had your reminders, we know that you're aware that it's ready for an update, and that might just prompt a conversation with the service about something that maybe needs doing a little bit differently, and it stops the member from chasing up separately with a senior member of staff, for example. The live dashboards, I'll not steal Paul's thunder on that, but we've got the dashboards available for services to have a look at constantly throughout the day. The Members Enquiries team have got a live dashboard just to have a look at what's coming in, what stage it's in, and all of that breakdown allows us to get the data out of the system that we really want, we really need. We get a lot of FOIs, we get a lot of subject access requests across the contact centre as a whole, and previously if we needed to get any information out there was a lot of manual reporting that we had to do. And when I say we, it was Lindsay, it wasn't me, I didn't do any of that. So it's just brilliant. System automation, eliminating administration errors, where we've got this mapping in place, we've got the reminders in place. If we need a tweak to it, quick conversation with Paul, Amanda, any of the team. Do you think we can do this? Yep, right, let's put some time in and let's have a look at how we do it. It's turned around in a reasonable amount of time. We're not having to wait significant amounts of time, and we're involved in those conversations and that development and that testing. And the improved reporting functionality, I think that's key to everything that we do across anything. But with members, we need it as quickly as possible. We need to be able to drill it down. But more importantly, we need services to be able to have that live data available to them so that they can see where their services are at. They can spot any issues, they can look at any trends, any themes, and they can learn from what they need to do differently. So, Members Enquiries team improvements, so they would include training the new elected members like Paul's mentioned, so that will be done again on a group setting with one-to-one buddies in that process. We'll keep them fully engaged, we'll be in contact with them just to check if we spot that they are putting inquiries on, sort of just checking in that whether they need anything else. If they're not putting inquiries on, a bit of a touch base with them of, are you having trouble accessing the system? Is there anything that we can do to support you? The relationship with the Members Enquiries team is key to it working, and we've got to keep some of that contact away from our services directly, because they need to be focusing on the doing, they need to be focusing on what needs to be done on the ground. So having a good relationship with members is really, really important. So introducing an escalation process to prevent inquiries, being in that resolution and reopened loop. So I guess one example could be a member submitted an inquiry on behalf of a resident or just on behalf of their ward, and it's gone through the process. The service have responded, it's in relation to a policy decision, and they're not able to do what is being asked because policy dictates that they're not able to do that. Where you've got the resolution where it can be reopened if the councillor doesn't agree with that, you can see a bit of a cycle going on. They'll reopen it, the service will reiterate that it's linked to policy, and just as one example. It will then go into the resolution closed or completed, and then the councillor potentially reopened. So we've been having a look at some of the examples, and again I'm using the Boyle we here. There's a lot of people involved in this area of work from various different levels. We're looking at the people who are using, and we're looking at senior managers just so that we can get them on board with this, and they've all been fantastic. We need that escalation process where the service have tried the hardest to explain the reasons why they aren't able to do either all or elements of what's been asked of them, and we just need that buy-in and that backup from senior managers, which we know we've got. They're all absolutely fantastic, they all engage with what we're trying to do, but it's done in the right way, it's done in the way so that services feel supported and so that members feel that this system has tried to help them get to that escalation route rather than going off and sending an email to one of the senior managers. Councillors being added into an inquiry, being able to add content. We've got, like probably all of you, we've got cross-party in ward areas. We've got some wards that have got the same party, political party, and what they like to do is copy other members in from their ward. We've got a variety of people that do it, people that don't, and we've given them that flexibility of choosing whether they want somebody to actually be linked in with their inquiry and also receive any updates, stops that duplication. So reviewing the process surrounding providing a resolution. We're always reviewing every stage of it. We always will, and we'll always take feedback from services and members. Providing a resolution is it's key that the right categories are being used about, does it need to go on hold because actually there's a meeting that needs to be held, it needs to go to cabinet, it needs to go to a scrutiny committee, is there something that it has to happen on a specific date that you've got absolutely no way of giving an answer before that? So different functionality around using on hold, using a resolution scheduled. So again, going back to highways, works order, a works ticket may have been ordered, and that may have a turnaround of however many days. So that enquiry will be resolution scheduled so that they can then confirm that something's been done. And moving forward, like I say, that's the kind of thing that I think we need to look at, of members' enquiries as in its own sort of in its own way, but what's been done within services that we can do slightly differently, or support members to report those transactional things in a way that will be dealt with through a process, and we can focus on some of the more complex queries. And then the implementation of Power BI dashboards, which is not my forte.
It's not mine either, to be honest, but Sean and Dustin were from the Joint Intelligence Unit unfortunately can't make it today, so they've put some slides together kind enough to explain this development, which is quite exciting. Members' Enquiries historically has liked its data. Services like to understand, how many average working days, for example, it takes to resolve an inquiry. Inquiries which are overdue. They do keep really well on top of those inquiries. But this solution is using, I'll skip this bit, just go straight to this actually. Jadu has a really interesting way of capturing data using something called webhooks. So what a webhook is that when something happens, we have a listener waiting for that event to happen, and it picks up the data related to that event. So for example, we have a webhook called case creation. So it's listening for that to happen. It picks all the data up that's related to that case being created, the coordinates of the inquiry, the details of that inquiry. And we also have a webhook called, which is related to the transition of the case. What a transition is when it moves from one status to another. If there's any data that's related to that transition, it picks that up too. So what that's enabled Sean and Dustin to do is basically get that information into SQL Server, create some tables around that so it's looking meaningful, then bringing that into Power BI and creating a data model around that. So just a little bit of a screenshot here is that the intention is to make this a live web-based Power BI report that services can see and keep on top of it. So this is due to go live soon. But this is actually sort of real data that you can see on the screen. This is like a screenshot taken from a web-based version of Power BI. And already you can see, what I think I forgot to say at the start of the presentation today, and feeding to what you said, Amanda, about taking on big processes, Members Enquiries is absolutely enormous. It actually is responsible, since launch in June 2021, 16,000 inquiries, which is off the scale really. So it is really our biggest sort of process in terms of submission rates. But this is actually for this last financial year, and 10,000 inquiries have been resolved within that time. Some interesting things around, so I can use my laser pen pointer. No, it's not working. But you can see there's quite a significant number of those inquiries that have been put on hold, 2,627. Interesting, we need some analysis around that. We need to understand why those inquiries are being put on hold. That's looking at, it's getting off about 25%, isn't it? What this dashboard can do, it's got granularity, it can look at a directorate's performance, and it can look at service performance as well. And what we want to sort of accompany this as well is actually a suite of sort of Power BI resources that are going to support services to monitor inquiries that are going overdue. So Lindsay and Joanne, the team's doing a great job in terms of keeping on top of that, but having something like this, it will help those services to pick up that responsibility for keeping track of those inquiries as well. So, just a last slide before we finish. So this is what the next steps are going to be. So we're going to develop those dashboards, providing services with the management information needed to respond to inquiries more efficiently and effectively. So tracking those statuses of those inquiries, so the services know where things are up to, and tracking the impact of those new developed dashboards against service KPIs. I think the lessons learned here is really important about this. Our job really when we got Jadu was a bit of lift and shift. We had 40 processes that we needed to get on. One of the things I think that we've reflected upon now is really data is very much central to developing those systems and processes. So Jeanette's here from Joint Intelligence Unit. I think we're having some conversations at the moment, aren't we? We have some interesting conversations early on about what Jadu data can do. I mean, what we can do with Jadu data, for example, is I think this is something that Sam is very keen about, flood risk management. Obviously, you get people submitting reports of floods when there's a flash flood. So using that Jadu data combined with our adult social care data, which would tell us where vulnerable people live, we can combine those two data sources to actually, react very quickly to a flood crisis where we would be supporting those vulnerable people within that area. So there's some exciting times ahead, I think, for the Jadu webbooks. And again, the beauty of webbooks, it's live. It's, so something happens, it gets brought into that SQL report and gets reflected in that Power BI report. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the key point to end on today, is that, if there's any sort of advice around this sort of thing, data being at the heart of it's really, really important. And I think Dustin, who was doing the SQL stuff, worked some minor miracles with that. I think the difficulty with members' inquiries, they go on hold when the clock stops and it comes out back in process and it starts again. So it's getting those formulas to actually understand what the average working days are, and that's been a really clever piece of work. But it's, it's really supporting services. To be honest, the performance has been good. It's for the magnitude of the change that we've gone through. There's some really, really good results coming out. I think it was a shock to the system when we went live with it, but things are definitely sort of leveling up and improving. So thank you very much for listening. Hope you enjoyed the presentation. If you want to speak to Sean and Dustin, we've left their email addresses there as well. If you're interested in webbooks, I'm sure they'll be delighted to answer how they've gone about their approach. And that's it from us.